Welcome, everyone. We are here at Layer8. I'm here with Ira Winkler. He is, of course, an established author. We're going to be talking about maybe his upcoming book and tease that a little bit. And he is the president of Secure Mentem?
Mentem.
Mentem, thank you.
Translates to secure mind in Latin.
Yes. Okay, there we go. Now it's all coming back.
Yeah.
You're no stranger to the show. It's nice seeing you. Welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me again.
So we're here at a social engineering conference, and I thought your perspective was very interesting in that for you, you center it around loss, right? Because really what, at the end of the day, we're trying to prevent is loss of the company, whether that's intellectual property, whether that's monetary loss, or some type of risk, right, that would lead to loss. And how do we do that?
Well, here's the thing. I do social engineering tests where I've taken over banks, I've stolen nuclear reactor designs, I've done a whole bunch of stuff. And at the end of the day, I hand in my report. Everybody says, oh my God, this is horrible. And it's frustrating because usually you play these games of gotchas and nobody changes at the end of the day. Like one company once had me back regularly as the mystery shopper. And after the third time, I was like, I'm effing useless here because it gets worse every time. And I was like,
because you learn more about how to be more effective and they haven't learned how to defend better.
Right. They haven't learned how to pick things up. And I was like, what am I doing wrong that it's getting easier every time? And what happened was I went to, because I raped and pillaged computer systems while I'm doing this stuff, one time this CISO said, before you leave, this guy wants to talk to you. Because he was an admin who was in charge of these systems that I basically hacked the hell out of. And I told him how I hacked his systems. He's like, why me? I go, it sounds cliche, but you have all the data.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay, I get that. Now I go, I have a question for you. Now that I've told you everything you want to know, I go, how come it's worse now than it was last time? He's like, let me give you an example. When you were here last time, the CEO literally said, this is horrible. We had a test done. Our crown jewels were lost in hours, and security is important. He's like, what do you do when you get a message like that? He's like, here's a couple messages I got today. He's like, donating to the United Way is good. I look at the message. I say, yes, donating to the United Way is good. Throw it in the trash. Sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is bad. That is true. I acknowledge that. I endorse that. Throw it in the trash. And then he's like, you got a message saying security is important. What do? It's like, security is important. Great. And then he's like, here's a message that we got from the physical security manager, because this is a Southern California company. In Southern California, they like to have nice decorative rocks around their buildings because they don't want to waste water on grass. So they put these big decorative rocks. And these big decorative rocks make ideal tools to throw through a window, run in, and do a smash and grab and steal computers. So what happened was the physical security manager sent out a message that said, we have had a bunch of smash and grabs. What we're going to do now is, at the end of every day, if you have a window office, you're supposed to put your shades down, turn off the light, lock your door. When you leave, the last person in your department is supposed to ensure that all the shades are down, lights are off, doors are locked. We are then going to have guards patrol to ensure everybody with a window office after they leave has shades down, windows off, and so. And the guy went, on the first time you fail, you will be warned, and your manager will be alerted. On the second time you fail to do this, you might be fired. It's like smash and grabs went completely away. Now compare that to your diagnostic of you did a test. Now, coming back to equate to what I think your question was, because I think I forgot it. But generally, when I'm looking at social engineering, I'm looking at how do I make that actually useful? Because we hear a game of gotchas. Oh, I got this information. I got that information. And at the end of the day, the guy from physical loss, he wasn't looking at a game of gotchas. He was looking at it like, I want to reduce all the loss I can.
Right.
And so what he did was he prescribed very specific information, not on being afraid of the wascally wabbit. He didn't tell people, well, there are bad guys, and bad guys use rocks, and bad guys do all these bad things. He's like, here's what you specifically need to do, and here's how we're going to measure it, and here's how the punishments are.
He implemented a remediation plan rather than just making people aware of a situation that may occur.
Right. So it's not like a game of gotcha where it's like, oh, I'm going to call up and find out the computer operating system. And so what I did was I started adapting these principles from safety, from physical security and elsewhere into how I implement social engineering and awareness program. So for example, with social engineering programs, honestly, somebody gives me a task, I will get it. That's a given. I will go in through one method, and if I find that one method in, theoretically I've succeeded. I've learned not to care about I found that one piece of information. When I go in and do a social engineering test, assuming it is not a game where I have to hand a company the crown jewels, but I want to provide value, I go ahead and I develop specific scripts to say, how do I measure the actual state of awareness? And I will call people up and I will go through scripts and say, okay, we are with the physical security, we're with computer security. We need to ensure that your antivirus software is up to date. I go, just out of curiosity, can you open up the registry file? And people will go, what's a registry file? I go, okay, I'm going to need to log in remotely onto your computer system. Can you give me your user ID and password? Now, if they give it to me, check the box. I've done that right. But if they don't give it to me, I have failed, and that's good. So at least
the detection is not, or the user should be aware that, hey, you shouldn't, be aware, or usually what we say to the user is, you should be aware that someone may call you up and ask you for your username and password, and that's bad. What you're saying, Ira, is there should be a policy that says you never give your username and password to anyone else, period, end of story. And if someone asks you that there's a procedure, much like drawing your shades down on the windows. Right.
There's a specific procedure, not what to be afraid of, but how you do things right.
Yeah. And your example before was, I'm posing as the CEO of the company, asking someone for something that goes outside of procedure. They should just follow procedure. Like, don't worry about what the different attacks might be, right?
Right.
Worry about follow your procedure, regardless of the circumstances.
Right, because as a social engineer, you can come up with unlimited situations.
Yeah, sure.
And if I train somebody, a social engineer will call you up and pretend to be from technical support and ask you for your password. They'll be like, technical support. If I call up and say, hey, I'm with HR and I need to reset your, it's time for open healthcare season. I need to reset your user. They're like, that's not technical support. That's HR. I need healthcare. As opposed to saying, you never give out your user ID and password.
Right.
Because I don't want people, like we had there was a presentation earlier on pickpocketing and sensory overload. I don't want people to have to think, is this the wascally wabbit? I want people to think, here are my musts. I must not give out my password.
Right.
No matter what the reason is.
How did we lose? We lost sight of that somewhere along the way. I feel like it used to be that way. Like, you basically had a rule that said, look, you never give your password to anyone else, right?
Well, we used to, but you look, frankly, I'm not big on the current state of how awareness is practiced in social engineering, in all honesty. Frankly, awareness has grown to be about sensationalism, about making things funny, as opposed to just what awareness should be is, what are the policies and procedures of an organization? Like when I was in the Marines for a short period of time when I went through officer candidate school. And when I was in there before I went, like Dennis A. Better. But when I was in there, we had an awareness lesson to be learned. We must not lose our rifles.
Right.
Very basic principle.
Popularized in Hollywood.
Every Marine a rifleman. And how did they, I use the example, if they were going to have a regular awareness program, they would have been like, let's get Gomer Pyle. He was a Marine. The Marines love Gomer Pyle and all that. And they would have been like Gomer Pyle having a nice, funny thing. My awareness lesson? Drill instructor walked in. He's like, you lose your rifle, you will do jail. And he walked out. I didn't even know what doing jail meant. It doesn't matter. It didn't sound good.
It didn't sound good,
We had one guy who literally had who broke his, broke his, calf area, bone through the skin. He was screaming for somebody to get him to grab his rifle because he didn't want to lose it. And everybody's like, and the sergeant instructor was like, get the F in that thing, we'll take care of your, and they literally had to order him not to worry about his rifle. And he still didn't believe it.
Yeah.
But that was because of a 5-second awareness lesson. Yeah. We're losing track of making things funny, making things entertainment, as opposed to saying, This is just part of your job. Mm-hmm. And I know.
It is very more clear and concise than I think some of the other. Now, people will say not to have negative consequences, but I also believe that there's a balance that has to be struck there.
Well, I believe that. Okay, so let's differentiate this. If the practice and use is clear and consistent, there should be consequences because, frankly, if you do not have enforcement, you do not have a policy.
Correct.
And people lose track of that. It's like, well, we can't, I was on a keynote panel for an ISAC event in Europe, and, I said, well, if the users do that, they're like, you can't blame the user. I'm like, why not? It's like, well, you can't. It's like the mantra is taking away responsibility for people to do things right. If somebody doesn't fill out like a lot of people here might be traveling and have to put in for reimbursement. If you don't put in for reimbursement,
you don't get the reimbursement. Yeah,
you don't get it.
Right.
It's like
you don't follow the rules, you don't get the reimbursement. That's a great example.
And why is that okay not to get money? Why is that not to get paid if you don't fill out your time card properly? Why is that okay if you lose your badge? You need to, and on physical security, it's okay. You lose your computer, you might be charged for it.
Right.
Why do we say you ruin the company by downloading a virus by going to a site you should have never been on?
Right.
Oh, well, please don't do that again.
And now you're going to be talking a lot about this in your new book that's coming out. We'll tease it a little bit, right?
So my new book is called You Can Stop Stupid.
I love the title.
Yeah, I got to admit, we were thinking, well, how stop hacking or human hacking. But somebody said, you can't stop stupid. I'm like, exactly the opposite, but pretty damn close. And so we titled the book, You Can Stop Stupid. 4% of the people will not buy it based on the word stupid in the title. However, we're good with it. So anyway, You Can Stop Stupid is based upon the principle that the problem is not that the user is unaware. The problem is that a user can initiate loss. And that sounds the same, but it's very different. Because when you're looking at this from a process perspective and a business perspective, you have to look at it, well, how do we create a situation where the user is not in the position to initiate loss? So, for example, can we take decisions away or implement technology to filter out attacks? Then once the user is in the position and has to make decisions, what is the actual process? Because in going to blaming the users, we can't blame the user if the user was never told the right way to do things. However, if we lay out, here's how you should act in a given situation, then we define those processes, and then we assume that the user might make a bad decision, and then we enact an environment around the user to mitigate the loss possibly initiated by the user. So just quickly, in a case of W-2 fraud, which is common up until a couple months ago, what happens is first they come in a phishing message that says, spear phishing message that says the user, I'm the CEO, send me the W-2 information. Well, that should be filtered out by the environment. Then the message gets to the user because it didn't get filtered out.
Right.
And then the user should say, hey, this is a message asking for PII. And you don't want the user thinking, is this the Wascally Wabbit? You want the user thinking, this is PII.
I know what to do now.
I know what to do. PII, that goes to my manager.
And there's technological controls that control, maybe other kind of violations of policy or potential violations of policy. I love it. When does the book come out?
Before RSA. That's the publisher-defined rule on when it's coming out. So anyway,
when
thanks
it comes
for that.
out, you're going to come on the show and talk more about it. So
thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ira.
Appreciate it.